morning, my name is Paul. Is the 23rd of March 2022, and you are watching Precious Flux Entertainment TV. Here is the news update. Zelensky, I'm ready for negotiations with Putin, but if they fail, it could mean a third world war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Sunday that he's ready for negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but warned that if they fail, that would mean that this is a third world war. Think that we have to use any format, any chance in order to have a possibility of negotiating, possibility of talking to Putin. But if these attempts fail, that would mean that this is a third world war, he added. Zelensky has urged more negotiations in recent days as Russia's invasion of Ukraine nears its fourth week. In a video message posted Saturday, he called for talks without delay, warning that otherwise Russia's losses would be huge. We have always insisted on negotiations. We have always offered dialogue, offered solutions for peace, he said. And I want everyone to hear me now, especially in Moscow. It's time to meet. Time to talk. It is time to restore territorial integrity and justice for Ukraine. Zelensky has previously said that his priorities in the talks are clear: the end of the war, security guarantees, sovereignty, restoration of territorial integrity, real guarantees for our country, real protection for our country. Zelensky also told Zakaria on Sunday that if Ukraine were a NATO member, a war wouldn't have started. I'd like to receive security guarantees for my country, for my people. If NATO members are ready to see us in the alliance, then do it immediately. Because people are dying on a daily basis, he said, while also adding that he was grateful for the aid NATO has provided since the invasion began. Still, last week, Zelensky dropped his clearest hint yet that he does not expect his country to join NATO anytime soon, something that has been a Ukrainian goal. NATO, a security alliance currently made up of 30 North American and European nations, was created in 1949 in response to the start of the Cold War. Its original purpose was to protect the West from the threat posed by the Soviet Union. Since the end of the Cold War, many former Soviet satellite states and 3 former Soviet republics have joined NATO, meaning Russia now shares a land border with the world's largest military alliance. We are trying to defend our sovereignty. Asked how he is holding up amid the war, Zelensky told CNN that he was doing just everything that everyone else in Ukraine is doing. We have made up our team to defend our country, so it seems to me that the person does not need to turn into anyone else. That is important when you can be just yourself, he said. So I am holding up quite well, he added. Zelensky also admitted that as of now his weakest point is losing people and children in these huge numbers. I go to sleep with this information about children who were killed, and we are continuing to pray in order to prevent new losses of people, but so far we haven't attained these results, he said, adding that we are trying to defend our sovereignty, defend our country. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights said Sunday that since the start of the war, 11 girls and 25 boys have been killed. Asked about Putin's claims that the Ukrainian government is full of neo-Nazis, Zelensky told Zakaria that it shows that the Russian president might be capable of very horrendous steps. I'm not afraid of anything except for people, but the fact is that if he is serious about this statement, he might be capable of very horrendous steps, because that would mean that this is not a game for him, Zelensky said. Back to the Netherlands news update. As municipalities across the Netherlands struggle to arrange accommodation for those fleeing the war in Ukraine, King Willem-Alexander has announced that his family will receive refugees at one of their estates near Apeldoorn. Dutch king to welcome Ukrainian families at Houdoudlu in Apeldoorn. In a statement released on Monday, the Government Information Service (RVD) announced that between 20 and 30 Ukrainian refugees will be sheltered at Houdoudlu, a 15th-century hunting lodge located on the grounds of Houdoudlu Palace on the outskirts of Apeldoorn, from mid-April. The announcement comes as municipalities work to set up accommodation for 50,000 Ukrainian refugees. The Dutch government had set local authorities the deadline of finding space for 25,000 refugees by March 21st, but yesterday Hubert Bruls, president of the Security Council, voiced his concerns about the scale of the task at hand. Those 25,000 will come, but my biggest concern is the period after that. We were going to do 25,000 more, and we have to seriously ask ourselves if that is enough, Bruls explained. emphasizing the fact that he hoped to secure more long-term accommodation for refugees, instead of having to rely on schools and hotels for temporary support. "We really need buildings where people can stay longer," he said. The Netherlands prepares to receive over 50,000 refugees so far. Around 12,000 refugees have been registered for accommodation in the Netherlands, and while the government initially expected to receive around 50,000, it looks as though the real figure may be much higher, as the United Nations reports that over 3.5 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia's invasion 1 month ago. State Secretary for Asylum and Migration Eric van der Berg confirmed on Monday that the Dutch government was looking to secure more long-term accommodation for refugees arriving from Ukraine. He told the House of Representatives, Tweede Kamer, that it was not entirely clear exactly how many refugees would be arriving in the Netherlands, but that he expected it would certainly be more than 50,000. Dutch citizens and residents are also trying to do their bit, signing up as host families for refugees from Ukraine via platforms such as Take Our Airbnb and Room for Ukraine. Take Our Airbnb announced on Monday that, from next week, around 1.250 Ukrainian refugees will be placed with families in the Netherlands every day. Dutch government relaxes entry requirements for all travelers. The Dutch government has clarified the new entry requirements for non-EU citizens traveling to the Netherlands, which are set to come into effect on Wednesday, March 23rd. Dutch government relaxes COVID-19 rules for all travelers following the latest update from Health Minister Ernst Kuipers in regards to the national coronavirus restrictions. There has been some confusion as to the entry restrictions for travelers arriving in the Netherlands from outside of the EU/Schengen area. However, new information on the government's website suggests that the cabinet has decided to relax entry requirements for all travelers, including non-EU citizens, from March 23rd. As of Wednesday, the following entry requirements apply in the Netherlands. Travelers from within the EU/Schengen area are no longer required to present a coronavirus certificate, that is proof of vaccination, recovery, or a negative test. EU citizens traveling to the Netherlands from outside of the EU/Schengen area are no longer required to present a coronavirus certificate. Travelers from outside the EU/Schengen area are no longer required to present a negative COVID-19 test, that is a fit-and-fly test. In order to enter the Netherlands, the Dutch government does advise all travelers to take a self-test immediately upon arrival in the Netherlands, and another 15 days after arriving in the country. New entry requirements come into effect on March 23rd. While the majority of travel restrictions have been lifted, the government does ask anyone arriving in the Netherlands to complete a health declaration form, and emphasizes that the EU entry ban remains in effect for a number of countries outside of the EU. There are, however, various exemptions to the entry ban, including for fully vaccinated travelers. In addition to these relaxations to the rules, the government has announced that, as of March 23rd, the Netherlands will also recognize recovery certificates issued on the basis of a positive antigen test. Up until now, only positive PCR tests have been officially recognized. Dutch Airlines confirmed they will no longer enforce face mask mandate. Straying slightly from the government's face mask rules, KLM, Transavia, TUI, and Corendon confirmed that, once the next stage of relaxations come into effect on March 23rd, they would no longer enforce the face mask rule for passengers on their flights. Dutch Airlines refused to enforce COVID-19 rule on flights. The airlines explained that, as more and more restrictions are lifted, it becomes increasingly difficult for their staff members to explain and enforce the face mask mandate. It can no longer be explained or defended. This has recently led to an increase in aggression towards our crew and other passengers, TUI said. KLM, TUI, and Transavia have all said they continue to urgently encourage passengers to wear masks while on board, but staff will not intervene should a passenger refuse to wear a mask. The companies have all expressed their disappointment in the government's decision to lift the mandate for public transport but not for flights. There is better air quality in planes than in trains, a spokesperson for TUI explained. Election results, good night for local parties, Labour now biggest in Amsterdam. This week, expats and Dutch citizens up and down the country went to the polls to have their say in the 2022 municipal elections. Here's a quick rundown of what happened. historically low turnout for 2022 municipal elections. Polling stations opened up at 7:30 a.m. on Monday, March 15th for the first of 3 days of voting in the Netherlands. While local elections generally tend to see a lower voter turnout, the Dutch gemeenteraadsverkiezingen are also open to a huge number of expats and internationals living in the Netherlands, resulting in a significantly higher number of eligible voters. In spite of this, however, this year's election saw a historically low turnout, with only 50.3% of people showing up to cast their vote, breaking the previous record of 53.8% set in 2014. Dutch Minister for Internal Affairs, Henk Bruce has announced she will be conducting an investigation into the reason for such a low turnout. For us, it is very important in the analysis to look at what are the causes of the low turnout, Bruce said on Thursday morning, explaining that it wasn't clear whether local circumstances or national matters were responsible. Local parties and new parties celebrate big wins. This low turnout didn't stand in the way of various local parties celebrating a successful evening. A number of the major Dutch political parties also enjoyed some solid wins across different municipalities, but the Netherlands' local political parties were the big winners of the night, further strengthening their hold on local politics. All in all, local parties took home around 36% of the vote, up from 29% 4 years ago. Demos, also known as Hart voor Den Haag, remains the largest party in The Hague. Similarly, in Rotterdam, Leefbaar Rotterdam held onto its majority and kept all 11 of its seats on the municipal council. In Maastricht, the Senioren Party overtook the Christian Democratic Appeal to become the biggest party in the municipality. New parties also enjoyed a fairly successful election results night, as BIJ1, JA21, and Volt all claimed seats in a number of municipalities across the country. In spite of these wins, however, the newer parties didn't lead to any major shifts in the makeup of the Dutch municipal councils. Rot's VVD remains biggest party in the Netherlands. Some of the bigger parties will also be celebrating on Thursday. After suffering slightly in the 2021 general election, GroenLinks leader Jesse Klaver was relieved to see his party's grip on local politics strengthen. "I hardly dare to believe it," he said. While GroenLinks lost its majority to the Labour Party in the Dutch capital, it increased its number of seats overall and became the largest party in both Tilburg and Leiden. With 17% of the vote, was, of course, overjoyed to claim the win in Amsterdam, but the party also won seats in Maastricht, Zwolle, and Dordrecht, amongst others. The Party for the Animals, PVDD, also celebrated a successful evening, receiving significantly more votes in 2022 compared to 4 years ago. The party of Prime Minister Mark Rutte, the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, VVD, remains the largest party in the Netherlands, but did lose a limited number of seats. D66 was also not disappointed by the final results, becoming the largest party in Den Bosch, Gouda, and Amersfoort, with leader Sigrid Kaag celebrating the party's hard-won extra seats. Some major Dutch parties left disappointed by results. On the other hand, some of the key parties were left disappointed. Thierry Baudet, leader of Forum for Democracy (FVD), acknowledged he had expected a little more from the results, but maintained that he was satisfied with the party's performance. Similarly, while Wopke Hoekstra was quick to say he wasn't disappointed by his party's performance, the PDA still suffered a number of blows, losing its majority in various municipalities. Overall, however, the party did manage to win seats. Geert Wilders' Party for Freedom, PVV, also suffered losses, receiving considerably fewer votes and winning only 61 seats nationally. The Socialist Party, SP, didn't live up to its expectations either, as it lost its majority in Oost to a local party, and saw its overall proportion of the votes dwindle from more than 4% in 2018 to just 2.7%. And that is the news update for today. Thanks for joining us. We will see you again on our next video. Bye bye.